In March 1863, an urgent letter arrived at Philadelphia's Academy of Natural Sciences, instantly challenging the accepted notions of human intelligence. The letter described a 9-year-old colored girl in a contraband camp near Alexandria, Virginia, who possessed impossible abilities. She could recite entire medical textbooks after hearing them only once, solve complex mathematical equations without instruction, and speak fluent Latin despite having no formal schooling. Dr. Samuel Calicott, the Academy's lead researcher, initially dismissed the account as abolitionist propaganda. However, when 3 separate military officials confirmed the story, adding that the girl had correctly diagnosed a physician's error and saved 2 soldiers' lives, Calicott became obsessed. His private journals later revealed that what he discovered in that camp would ultimately force him to destroy years of his own research and vanish from public life. In early 1863, the contraband camps outside Alexandria were chaotic monuments to hope. Thousands of formerly enslaved people, newly freed by the Emancipation Proclamation, poured into Union territory. Camp Relief No. 7 housed about 240 souls. Among them was Eliza Davis, a small, thin 9-year-old, with a face that held large, watchful eyes. These were eyes that seemed to constantly calculate, measure, and record everything they observed. The first to notice her strange gift was Lieutenant James Carmichael, a young Massachusetts officer tasked with conducting a census. As Carmichael questioned Eliza, he noticed her gaze fixed with unmistakable hunger on his medical textbook, Gray's Anatomy, which was open to a detailed illustration of the human heart, labeled in Latin. Though Eliza whispered that she couldn't read, she quickly demonstrated why she didn't need to. When asked what she saw in the picture, she pointed. "That's the heart, sir. The aorta carries blood from the ventricular synestate, the left ventricle, to the body." Eliza explained that she had memorized the terminology by cleaning the room of her former master's son, a medical student who read his books aloud. Carmichael spent the next hour testing her claim. She flawlessly reproduced conversations, including those in German or French, and recited passages from the medical text word for word. But the truly unsettling moment came when Carmichael asked her to explain the passages. She did so with genuine comprehension, describing the circulatory system and the function of organs using correct medical terminology that should have required years of formal education. When Carmichael mentioned a puzzled camp physician, Eliza suggested the patient suffered from pleurisy complicated by malnutrition, recommending a specific treatment protocol. The girl's intellectual capacity was clearly far beyond any logical explanation. Eliza's diagnosis, pleurisy, complicated by malnutrition, was confirmed correct, and the recommended treatment saved lives. The War Department immediately recognized the immense and potentially explosive political implications. In 1863, with the South's entire social order resting on the belief in Negro intellectual inferiority, a 9-year-old girl who transcended normal human cognition was dangerous. She was living proof that the scientific justification for slavery was false. On April 3, 1863, Dr. Samuel Calicott, a leading craniologist at Philadelphia's Academy of Natural Sciences, received a secret request to investigate. Calicott, who had built his career on proving that Negro skulls were smaller and their brains resembled those of apes, brought his calipers, charts, and texts to Camp Relief No. 7. He was determined to prove Eliza was merely a case of highly developed memory combined with mimicry, arguing that individuals of inferior races could perform complex tasks without true comprehension. The camp's medical officer, Dr. Marcus Lindley, met Calicott with barely concealed skepticism, having already witnessed Eliza's impossible abilities. As Calicott entered Eliza's tent, his initial journal entry noted her as a typical Negro child. Then, Eliza looked up and spoke softly. "Good morning, Dr. Calicott. You believe Negro skull capacity averages approximately 5 cubic inches less than Caucasian skulls?" Calicott stared. Eliza went on to perfectly recount a private conversation Calicott had with Dr. Lindley the previous afternoon, including the exact time and subject to Knox controversy, and the Burke and Hare conversation that had taken place over 200 yards away, Eliza explained. "Sound carries in camps like this, sir, especially when the wind comes from the east, like it did yesterday. I hear many conversations, Over the next 6 hours, Calicott performed the most rigorous intellectual examination of his career. Eliza reproduced flawless passages in Latin, Greek, French, and German. She moved beyond mimicry, however, offering genuine analysis. She identified logical inconsistencies in the philosophical arguments of Kant and Hegel, and pointed out mathematical errors in published proofs. Her questions were fundamentally challenging. Regarding bloodletting for fever, Eliza asked. Blood carries oxygen to If someone has a fever, their body is fighting infection. Why remove the blood that carries resources to fight the disease? Wouldn't that weaken them further? Calicott, a pillar of the medical establishment, had no answer. The final test cracked Calicott's scientific detachment. When Dr. Lindley played a complex sequence on the violin, Eliza immediately identified the notes, adding, "That's from Mozart's Requiem, Confutitis. Maladie, bars 43 through 48, but you played the F slightly flat, about a quarter tone." When questioned, she revealed she had heard the piece played only once, 2 years ago. Calicott was left facing an intellectual capacity that defied every scientific and racial theory he had ever published. "I remember everything, sir. Every sound, every word, every face. I can't forget even when I want to." This statement confirmed the extraordinary burden Eliza carried. A perfect, permanent memory that retained every detail, every sensation, every trauma she had ever witnessed, without the normal human capacity for forgetting. For the next 2 hours, Calicott frantically searched for a limit to her abilities. There was none. Her memory was perfect, her comprehension instantaneous, and her analytical capacity exceeded that of trained adults. When his assistant, William Driscoll, suggested their theories might be wrong, Calicott furiously defended his career's work. But privately, he was terrified. If Eliza was possible, then the scientific framework built to prove Negro intellectual inferiority was a lie. This threatened the intellectual edifice that justified slavery in his entire professional life. That night, Calicott's sleepless vigil was broken by the sound of Eliza speaking perfect Latin. He found her in the medical tent, clinically diagnosing a soldier suffering from a festering leg wound and near-fatal anaerobic infection. Lindley was preparing for a futile amputation, but Eliza suggested a radical alternative, based on a paper she had overheard 2 weeks earlier. Joseph Liester's controversial antiseptic method. "He's already dying," Eliza stated simply. "This gives him a chance." Calicott, despite his professional resistance, knew she was right. He authorized the terrifying procedure. For 2 brutal hours, they followed Eliza's precise instructions, aggressively debriding the wound and cleaning it with carbolic acid. By dawn, the soldier's fever had broken. He survived, saved by knowledge the medical establishment wouldn't widely accept for another decade. Calicott immediately wrote a preliminary report to the War Department. Subject demonstrates cognitive capabilities that exceed current scientific understanding. Comprehension and analytical reasoning operate at a level inconsistent with subject's age, education, and racial category. He understood the dark implication of the War Department's swift, chilling response. Absolute secrecy must be maintained. Eliza was not a subject of scientific inquiry. She was a resource, or a threat, to be controlled. Over the following weeks, the tests intensified under the direction of additional researchers sworn to secrecy. Eliza demonstrated mastery in every domain: astronomy, mathematics, linguistics, and chemistry. Yet, the relentless testing took a toll. She grew thinner and quieter. Her guardian, Ruth, revealed the true cost of Eliza's gift. "She remembers everything, sir. Every lashing she saw, every child sold away from their mother. It's all there in her head forever, fresh as the day it happened." The perfect memory that made her an intellectual marvel was also an endless, unforgiving torture chamber. The question, how does a child live with that, began to haunt Dr. Calicott. He realized he wasn't studying a scientific puzzle. He was studying a child cursed with the perfect, permanent memory of slavery's full brutality. In early May, their uneasy equilibrium was shattered by a Confederate raid on a nearby contraband camp. Dr. Lindley confirmed the fear. Rumors about Eliza's impossible abilities were spreading. Southern sympathizers wanted her eliminated. Confederate intelligence wanted her captured, and the Union wanted her controlled. Everyone saw her as a tool or a threat. That night, Calicott went to Eliza's tent. Alone, he put aside his instruments and his clinical detachment. Eliza wasn't surprised. "I understand that I'm dangerous, sir," she told him. "That's why everyone's afraid." She explained the logic she learned on the plantation. When someone like her is extraordinary, they become a problem, either proving an unwelcome truth or becoming something valuable to steal or destroy. She cited the tragic fate of a Master S hunting dog that was too smart and valuable to be allowed to live. Calicott asked what she truly wanted. For the first time, Eliza's carefully controlled composure cracked. "I want to forget, sir, just for one day." Tears filled her eyes as she described the unbearable weight of her perfect recall, remembering her mother's face when she was sold, the exact sound of the chains, the auctioneer's words when her 6-year-old brother was sold as good breeding stock, and the horror she heard through the walls when a 14-year-old girl was abused. "That's what my gift really is," she whispered. "Perfect memory of every nightmare I've ever lived." This raw, agonizing truth shattered Calicott's clinical detachment. He finally understood the human cost of the system he had spent his career justifying. "I can't give you forgetting," he said. "Nobody can." But he vowed to do something else. "I can make sure you're not treated as a specimen anymore, that you're allowed to be a child as much as possible." Eliza questioned his motives, asking if he would sacrifice his reputation, which was built on theories of black inferiority. Calicott confessed that meeting her had taught him his entire career was built on a foundation of lies. He explained the impossible dilemma. If he published the truth about her, she would destroy his career but become a symbol. "The moment I publish, you become the most famous Negro in America. You'll never have privacy or peace, or the chance to be anything except a specimen and a symbol." Eliza questioned the value of hiding her truth, asking about the others still in slavery. Calicott told her the war would prove their worth through 1,000 smaller examples, through their fighting and free labor. He warned her against becoming a curiosity, citing the case of a mathematical prodigy who suffered a complete mental collapse after being constantly studied by scholars. "They would break you," he concluded. Calicott starkly presented the risk to Eliza, contrasting her situation with the mathematical prodigy who was white, wealthy, and protected, yet destroyed by constant examination. "What do you think they would do to you, a Negro girl with no legal protection, ... He warned that they would either use her until she broke, or claim her breakdown proved their theories of racial inferiority. Eliza, shaking slightly, accepted the dilemma. Either hide or be destroyed. Calicott offered a third option: deception, an escape. He would write a report that was a complete lie, stating her abilities were overstated and her comprehension lacked genuine understanding or original thought. He would then arrange for her and Ruth to go north to a Quaker school where she could be protected and be a child who happens to be brilliant rather than a specimen. Eliza gave him the first real, tentative smile he had ever seen. For the next 3 days, Calicott meticulously crafted his deceit. He filled his official report with technical language, concluding that Eliza's case does not represent a case requiring further scientific study, and that she showed no evidence of capabilities that would challenge current understanding of racial intellectual capacity. Dr. Lindley, reading the draft, was stunned, but agreed to support the lie, recognizing that sometimes mercy is more important than truth. He noted that Calicott was sacrificing his greatest scientific discovery and destroying his career in racial science. Calicott accepted the cost. "I can't unknow what I've learned. The only question is what I do with that knowledge, and I choose to protect her, even if it means destroying my career." On May 22, 1863, the fraudulent report was submitted. The War Department, relieved to close a political complication, swiftly approved the recommendations. However, Calicott's assistant, William Driscoll, who had witnessed everything, confronted his mentor, calling the report professionally dishonest. Calicott gave Driscoll a stark choice. You can insist on truth and watch a child be torn apart by the system, or you can accept that sometimes protecting the vulnerable is more important than satisfying curiosity. Driscoll, after a long silence, agreed to support the report, demanding only to know that Eliza would be safe. Calicott arranged every detail of her escape. He provided funding from his personal savings and secured her passage with a trusted Quaker community in Pennsylvania. He also gave her a new identity: Sarah Mitchell, an orphaned free Negro child. As Eliza and Ruth boarded the wagon on May 24th, 1863, Eliza looked at Calicott with her knowing eyes. "Thank you for lying in your report," she said. Calicott was shocked. "How did you—" "I read it, sir," she interrupted, "when you left it on the desk. I remember every word." "Why did you lie?" Calicott finally found the words of his transformation. "Because I realized that scientific truth isn't always the same as human good. Because you deserve a life, not a laboratory." Eliza's question whether Calicott would publish the truth and change the system, even if it destroyed her life, hung heavily between them. I just want to learn things and maybe help people and not have everything I do be about proving something to white people who don't believe I am human enough to be smart. Calicott promised her the chance to be herself, to learn and grow without being a specimen or symbol. When she raised the concern for others still in slavery, Calicott admitted the tension his merciful lie might perpetuate the scientific falsehoods. But he insisted the war and the collective action of freed people would prove their truth more sustainably than one exceptional child could. You don't have to carry that burden alone. Before the wagon pulled away, Eliza called back. "Will you write down what really happened? Not now, maybe, but someday. So, someone knows the truth." Calicott promised. And with that, she was gone. Calicott stood in the mud, certain of his choice. Yet knowing he had betrayed his scientific principles and falsified his research, he returned to Philadelphia, presenting his conclusions as merely disappointing. By 1865, unable to endure the stress of maintaining a reputation built on lies, he quietly resigned from the Academy of Natural Sciences, moved to upstate New York, and ceased practicing science entirely. He maintained contact with Eliza through coded letters from his Quaker contacts. Then, in March 1865, the letters stopped. On March 22nd, he received a cryptic, unsigned note: "The bird has flown from the nest." Searching, Calicott immediately traveled to the Quaker school near Redstone, Pennsylvania. The director, Hannah Pembroke, confirmed that Eliza, known there as Sarah Mitchell, had disappeared on the evening of March 17th. There were signs of disturbance: an overturned chair, scattered papers, but no blood. The local constable dismissed the case, claiming freed Negro children run away all the time. Ruth, Eliza's guardian, was convinced she was taken. She reported that Eliza had been suffering nightmares about being examined again and felt she was being watched by a tall, thin man wearing spectacles. Ruth revealed that Eliza had hidden a letter under her mattress in case of her disappearance. The letter, written in Eliza's precise hand, confirmed Ruth's fears. It stated her real name, Eliza Davis, and gave the exact dates and times she had been watched by the man with It concluded with a desperate plea: "If I disappear, please tell Dr. Samuel Calicott of Philadelphia. He tried to protect me by lying in his report, but I think someone discovered the truth anyway." The protection Calicott had sacrificed his career for had failed. Eliza's farewell letter, written on the night of March 16, 1865, documented her capture with chilling precision. She knew she was a target effect she attributed to her extraordinary abilities, which made a living proof that the racial theories justifying slavery were false. "I was not what the scientists said Negro people are," she wrote, "and whether I live or die, that truth exists. Someone should know it." The letter, analytical even in its fear, ended simply: "If you are reading this, it means I was right to be afraid." Eliza Davis called Sarah Mitchell, age 11 years and 1 month. Calicott, reading the letter, was overwhelmed by the clear evidence of his failure. Ruth, Eliza's guardian, was broken. desperately regretting that she couldn't remember the details of the threatening watcher as perfectly as Eliza could. Calicott sat with her, gathering crucial information. The watcher was tall, thin, wore spectacles, and a dark coat. Ruth also revealed Eliza's nightmares about being examined again and a strange comment she made about the watcher's coat being made from the same specific imported wool that Calicott's assistant, William Driscoll, had once described. Calicott's blood ran cold. He immediately examined the library, quickly discerning what the local constable had missed. The scattered papers and scuff marks on the floor indicated a sudden struggle, and faint marks suggested the window had been forced open to surprise her. However, there were no mud tracks by the window, Calicott realized. They came in through the window to surprise her, but they left through the door. He also found a thread of dark, expensive wool caught on the door from evidence that this was a professional capture. Convinced the kidnapping was tied to his former assistant, Calicott hired a private investigator and confronted William Driscoll, now a junior physician in Philadelphia. Driscoll's face showed guilt, and he swore he hadn't told anyone directly about Eliza's true abilities. Under intense pressure, Driscoll finally confessed his betrayal. The previous fall, at a medical conference in Boston, he had been drinking, angered by a researcher discussing racial intelligence theories. He boasted that he had seen evidence that would overturn everything. He refused to give details or the girl's name, but he did admit that the documentation of the case, Calicott's fraudulent report, and the true findings sealed to protect the subject. The researcher Driscoll had spoken to was Dr. Edmund Voss, associated with Harvard Medical School, known for his studies in cognitive development and intelligence assessment. Voss was persistent, and Calicott felt the room tilt with the devastating knowledge that his lie had been undermined by his former protege's drunken boast. Calicott, his voice hollow, confronted Driscoll with the devastating truth. "You might as well have drawn him a map." He explained that Dr. Edmund Voss, the researcher Driscoll spoke to, was a collector of rare cognitive cases with a private, secretive research facility named Thornhill in western Maryland. Calicott believed that Driscoll's drunken boast about sealed evidence of exceptional black intelligence gave Voss the exact lead he needed to track and abduct Eliza. "You killed her, William," Calicott stated with cold fury, "by talking when you'd promised not to." He left Driscoll weeping, but the confrontation did nothing to save Eliza. Calicott's subsequent search for Voss was futile. The Harvard researcher was elusive, and his Maryland facility was guarded and remote. Just days after Lee Serena ended the war in April, Calicott received a visit from Colonel Hayes of the War Department. Hayes revealed that Voss had petitioned the War Department, claiming Calicott's 1863 report was falsified, and that Eliza's abilities represented a valuable national resource that should be studied. Calicott faced a terrible choice: admit the lie and prove Eliza's value, intensifying the state's effort to exploit her, or maintain the lie, leaving her without official interest, but sacrificing his reputation. He chose the latter, standing by his original, false report. "My report was accurate. Dr. Voss is mistaken." He reaffirmed that one child's life was more valuable than the political truth that might be used to harm her. Desperate and isolated, Calicott received an anonymous letter in late May, naming the location, Thornhill, near Cumberland, Maryland. The letter warned that a colored girl was brought there in March, but urged Calicott not to go himself. As the place was heavily watched, Calicott immediately hired his investigator, Marcus Webb, for a mission of surveillance and extraction. Webb and his team located Thornhill, an isolated, guarded estate. After 2 weeks of observation, Webb reported seeing a small, dark-skinned figure moving occasionally past a barred third-floor window. "It's definitely a captive," Webb confirmed. The extraction was set for June 23, 1865. Calicott waited agonizingly in a safe house. Before dawn, on June 24th, Webb returned alone. "We got in," he reported wearily. They reached the third-floor room but found it empty, recently vacated. They found a desk, medical equipment, and hundreds of pages of notes documenting cognitive tests and memory assessments, all dated from late March through June 20th, just 3 days prior. The subject was listed only as Subject E, but the notes detailed abilities that perfectly matched Eliza. Marcus Webb's infiltration confirmed Eliza was subject E, alive but suffering severe psychological deterioration. Voss's notes, which Webb retrieved, were meticulous, yet horrifying. They detailed relentless testing, sleep deprivation, and painful stimuli, confirming that Eliza was breaking. Voss's final entry stated, "Subject shows signs of severe psychological deterioration. Nightmares increasing. Difficulty distinguishing memories from present reality. Recommendation: terminate study and relocate subject to appropriate facility." Appropriate facility. Calicott repeated numbly. Webb feared the worst, that an unstable, liability-ridden subject who knew too much would be quietly disposed of. Voss himself vanished from public life. His facility sold, his secrets gone. In July 1873, Calicott received a letter from Thomas Ricks, a dying former Union officer. Ricks confessed his unit had abducted Eliza on March 17, 1865, under orders to secure a national security risk. They delivered her to Voss's private facility. Realizing they were unwitting participants in a kidnapping disguised as official business, Ricks later learned that in late June 1865, Eliza was transferred again to St. Elizabeth's Federal Asylum in Washington, classified as a freed slave suffering from severe mental disorder, nonverbal, and unresponsive. The officer believed Eliza was taken because of Calicott's findings, and destroyed because Calicott failed to protect her. "If she is still alive in that asylum," Ricks wrote, "she has been there nearly 8 years, lost in a system that does not care about her." Calicott immediately traveled to the chaotic St. Elizabeth's Hospital for the insane. He spent weeks searching, bribing orderlies, and walking through wards teeming with war casualties and traumatized freed people. The records were non-existent for most charity patients. He found dozens of young black women, but never Eliza. In October 1873, Calicott gave up. A broken man, he returned home and destroyed all his research on racial science, watching his life's work turn to ash. He kept only 3 items. Eliza is a blue ribbon, a page of her handwritten notes, and a sealed letter addressed to whoever finds this. In that letter, Calicott documented the entire truth of Eliza Davis's extraordinary abilities. His choice to lie to protect her, her abduction, and her likely fate in the asylum. He left the haunting question for the future. I had to choose: maintain my theories and destroy the evidence, or accept the truth and destroy my life's work. Was I right to try to give her a chance at a normal life? I don't know. Dr. Samuel Calicott died on March 17, 1889, exactly 24 years after Eliza's disappearance. His sealed box was rediscovered in 1941. But Eliza's story was too fragmented to impact history. She remains a ghost, a brilliant child who might have possessed the most extraordinary cognitive abilities ever documented, who existed at the intersection of slavery and science, and who was ultimately swallowed by a system that could not tolerate her existence. Her survival remains unknown, but her haunting legacy persists as one of the untold casualties of a history determined to silence the truth.